Hello guys, Ralph Forex here, back with another video. And in today's video, we're going to be covering the topic, right? The best sessions to trade in the Forex market. So today I'm going to be discussing with you guys the best sessions to trade in the Forex market, right? And the reason why this is important is because you need to be able to time the market when the market is going to make those moves, those very volatile or those very impulsive moves in either direction, right? It doesn't happen during all the sessions, especially based on the pair, right? So today we're going to be looking at AED USD. So AED USD is the Australian dollar against the US dollar. Now for this pair, you're going to be seeing moves more in the London and more in the New York session. The London is not as powerful as the New York session. If we're looking at a pair like GBP USD, which is the pound USD, right, it's going to be more active during the London session as well as the New York session. For a pair like AED USD, it could be less active in the London session. It's always very active in the New York session. Sometimes it might be active in the London session as well. It might move very well in the London session and the New York session as well. But most of the time, it's going to be very, very active in the New York session. So I have an indicator on my chart right here, which is called session breaks, right? So session breaks, which are all these lines. And what these lines represent is each day, right? So this is the end of each day. This is the beginning of each day, the end of each day, beginning of the next day, the end of the next day, the beginning of the next day, the end of the next day, right? So it divides the chart into each day, right? Every 24 hours, we have a new line. Every 24 hours, we have a new line. So once the new week opens, once Monday opens, or once we have a market open on Sunday evening, we're going to have a new line here, right? And then price action will continue from there. So that's what these lines represent. So in between these days, there are basically three major sessions that we have, right? There are basically three major sessions we have in between this to this, this to this, this to this, this to this, this to this. There are three major trading sessions that are occurring between these time frames, between these time periods, right? So the first one is the Asian session. The second one is the London session, and the third one is the New York session, right? And these sessions happen in rotation every day, right? So the Asian session usually starts around 10 a.m., sorry, 10 p.m., right? Nigerian, I'm talking to Nigerians now, right? So basically it starts around like the 10 p.m. all the way through to like the morning hours up to like 6 a.m., right? Then we have a minor session, which is like the Frankfurt session. It really like looks like sometimes we might mistake it for like the London session, although I don't consider it like a session to trade. I just put it as together with like the London session, but it usually starts from like 7 a.m. or 6 a.m. all the way to 8 a.m., right? That Frankfurt session. So Asian session is mostly like from 10 p.m., 11 p.m., midnight, all the way to like 6 a.m. While London session is usually from like 8 a.m., most times 8 a.m., all the way to like 5 p.m. And then New York session starts from like 2 p.m. all the way to like 6 p.m. or 9 p.m., right? And there's an overlap between like the London session and the New York session. And that's usually around 2 p.m. when the New York session opens. And that's when there is major volume in the market. That's like the most impulsive time in the market. That New York session and London session overlap. When I used to trade smart money concepts or ICT concepts, the New York session open was very, very important because there was a lot of liquidity and a lot of volatility injected into the market at that time. So I used to trade a lot of the New York session overlap, the New York-London overlap. So it was that 2 p.m. So that's a very, very key time. Even to this day, I use that approach when I'm trading the market. I always have an alarm set for New York session. So once that New York session open comes, I'm already like looking at either I'm monitoring my trades or I'm looking for potential entries around that time, right? So that's a very, very, very volatile session. The New York session overlap with the London session, right? When the New York session overlaps with the London session, that's a very, very key time to look at. So let me just go down to like the 30-minute time frame to kind of, let's have a closer look at these sessions. All right, so let's start. I want to go back a bit. So like we said the Asian session usually starts around 10 p.m. all the way to like 6 a.m., right? So we're going to just use our eyes right here. So this is 10 all the way to 6. Let me try and use like a box. So this is from 10 all the way to 6 a.m. So this is the 6 a.m. candle here. So all of this move right here is the Asian session, right? This is the Asian session. This was the whole move during Asia. We had push to the upside, downside, upside. So it was kind of sideways, but moving up a bit, right? Then we have the London session, which is usually from 8 a.m. all the way to 5 p.m., right? All the way to like 5 p.m., which is here. But one thing we have is like the London-New York overlap. So this is the close of the London session, right? So we have the 8 p.m. here, 8 a.m. here, sorry. 8 a.m. from this candle. So this is London session now. And you can see how London session just started to drop, started to see the market push down in the London session. And then New York session is by 2, so 14 o'clock, right? And you can see it's right here. This is the opening of the New York session, and then price continued to the downside. So you can see that here, price continued, New York continued in the direction of London, right? So for this day, the most active session was the London session, right? So you can see the London session as well as the New York session offers the most opportunity, right? And for the New York session, let me mark that out again. This was the opening 2 p.m. all the way to 9 p.m. So this was the whole of New York, right? Now let's go to the next day and let's do the same thing. Asia, from all the way from here to 6 a.m. This is the whole of Asia session. So we saw a rally and then a move sideways. London session was from here all the way to 5 p.m. So this was London session. $8 a.m. 5 p.m. right? And we had New York, our New York session overlap, which was from 2 all the way to 9, right? 2 o'clock all the way to, there's a 9 o'clock candle. Yeah, this is the 9 o'clock candle here. So on this day, you can see how, you can see the session that was the most active, which is the New York, right? So you have the Asian session. The Asian session typically for this pair is the least volatile or the least impulsive session, right? You can see that there's very little movement in the market during the Asian session. So for a pair like AUD/USD, it is not really profitable to trade the Asian session, but it is more profitable to trade the London session and the New York session, right? You can see here we had kind of like sideways movement in the Asia session. In the London session, we had more volume to the upside. And then in the New York session, we had much more volume to the upside, right? So this is how you can look at the sessions. I want us to take more examples, but I want us to take more examples from like previous time. Okay, I think we'll have a good example here. So let us mark out Asian session again from 10 all the way to 6 a.m., which is this. So this Asian session, we had more of like a range, then London session, which is here all the way to 5 p.m. And then for New York is all the way from 2. So this is 2 o'clock all the way to 9 p.m. Right? So we can see Asia, London was a bit sideways, right? This is pre-New York, 1:30. So this could also, in some situations, which could also like look at this as part of the New York session, right? As part of that overlap between London and New York, right? And you saw this kind of volume come into the market during that open or 30 minutes before the open, right? Which technically is still the New York session because maybe there was a news event at this time at 1:30 that made the market push in this direction. And then the New York session continued in that direction throughout the rest of the day, carried on into Asian session for the next day. And you can really break down the market like this every day. And you can look, let's go to the next day, right? Same thing here. From 10 all the way to 6 a.m. And then we have London from 8 all the way to 5, right? And we have our New York session all the way from 2 to 9, right? So for this day, you can see again, Asian session, relatively small movement, relatively sideways movement. London session, we had a push to the downside, impulsive move, right? And then from New York session, when we had that New York overlap, right? We saw price have another impulsive move to the downside. So this just goes to like really confirm what I'm saying about the London session and the New York session overlap. That's the time where you can really, really get like good entries. So for those, when I was trading smart money, right? This was typically where I was looking for entries, right? During these overlaps, this was where I was looking for entries, right? During these overlaps. And if you are also good at trading smart money, then you can start to find entries at some of these kill zones, right? It's called like the New York session kill zone. So it's during these overlaps of the London, New York session, that's when you can get those your mitigations of your other blocks or whatever. That was what I was using, right? And it was working for me, right? It worked for me in terms of entries, but I don't use trade smart money anymore, right? So you can really use this session overlaps if you're a smart money trader or if you're a day trader and you're looking for like the best time for your entries, right? This is the best time to time your entries for pairs that have for pairs that are based against like the USD, like AD USD, GBP USD, USD card, Euro USD, right? And so on and so forth. Any pair that is just based with like the USD, even for gold, XAU USD pairs like that, right? You can use this London session New York session overlap to kind of time your entries in the market and get really, really, really good entries, right? So that's just that's basically what it is, right? So for me, the best session to trade for a pair like AUD/USD is the London session and the New York session, right? It's different for every pair. It's going to be different for every pair. There are pairs that are most tradable during the Asian session. There are pairs that are most tradable during the London. For any pair that has GBP, right, the London session is actually the best and the most volatile, right? It also works with like the it also works with the New York session overlap, but not for all, right? So for pairs like GBP USD, the London session overlap and the London New York session overlap is a good thing, right? But for a pair like GBP AUD, right, it might not really make a difference, right? You might have a lot of movement on GBP AUD in Asia and in London session, but you might have little movement during New York session as well. So it just depends on the pairs, because these pairs are you're trading a country's currency, and these countries have their own special hours where their stock markets are very, very active, right? Based on time zones, all of that. But for us here in Nigeria, we have a very good correlation with like the London time zone, right? So it's almost like when we wake up, like we're either an hour ahead of London, right? So it's almost like when we wake up, they already started, our sessions kind of correlate, and we can trade alongside the London session, right? Which is like the biggest, London is like the biggest trading market in the whole world, right? So it's like the biggest market in the whole world. So we have very huge upside as traders in Nigeria, because we can actually trade alongside the London session and the New York session, right? And these are like the biggest world markets, London and the US, right? These are like the biggest world markets. So trading alongside these sessions, right, or these time zones is very, very, very beneficial to us as well as traders here. So this has been like a breakdown on the best time frames to trade. Sorry, the best sessions to trade, not the best time frame. The best sessions to trade in the Forex market, right? And it has been London session and New York session for today, right? So to get these indicators for separating the charts into different days, you just need to go to your settings, right? You right click on the screen, you go to settings, and you can see here we have session breaks. So if I tap on session breaks, you see the line appears, right? So it's just session breaks, right? And it will automatically divide the charts into each 24 hours, right? So this is the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.